You will not find this gospel in the lists of the New Testament. It belongs to the apocryphal books, banned and excluded by the Church at the Ecumenical Council. But despite the fact that the book is not included in the canon because its content does not comply with the accepted rules, it is a completely historical document created in the 4th century AD in Greek. And by the way, there are real copies from the 5th century. Aramaic, the language in which the Bible was written in ancient times and from which it was translated into Greek, is greatly overestimated by researchers for the reason that it is lexically very poor, and it is difficult to convey the full meaning of this or that event with its help. And the New Testament is written almost entirely in Greek. So what does the Gospel of Nicodemus tell us about? In its first part, the trial of Jesus Christ is described in great detail, described in such detail as in no other New Testament book. It is curious that in the Gospel of Nicodemus, Pontius Pilate tries with all his might to defend Jesus, and his servants and standard-bearers openly fall to their knees before Jesus. That is how much the population revered Jesus. Moreover, the common people also stand up for Jesus, the blind and bedridden people he healed, which shows that Jesus was already worshipped and revered as the greatest Messiah and healer during his lifetime. Pilate several times claims that Jesus is not guilty, but the Jewish priests, denying all logic, demand that Jesus be crucified. They say that this is the one King Herod wanted to kill, and it is because of him that the babies in Bethlehem died. It is important that it is in the Gospel of Nicodemus that the names are given. The centurion Longinus, who pierced Jesus with a spear and ended his torment, and the robbers who were crucified with Jesus, Dismas and Gestas. The God himself, whom the Jewish high priests worship, is called none other than the God of Israel, the God who led the Jews out of Egypt, parted the sea, and gave the Jews the law. The second part of the Gospel of Nicodemus tells us that many people were resurrected along with Jesus. Among them were 2 people who were entrusted with a special mission. These are the 2 dead sons of the lawyer Simeon. They were publicly buried, but after the resurrection of Jesus, they came out of their tombs and returned to their city, but they were silent all the time, like the dead. They were called to Jerusalem, and since they could not speak, they wrote about what happened to them after death and how Jesus led them and other righteous people out of hell. Some very curious things are also mentioned there. For example, what the tree of mercy is, the oil of which heals any disease, and which Seth, the son of Adam, asked for at the gates of the Garden of Eden to heal his father. Or, for example, that the second coming will happen and the world will end 5,555 years after its creation. And at the end, there is a great dialogue between Satan and the Lord of Hell. Probably it is the dark angel Abaddon, and Satan asks him to take Jesus to hell and says that Jesus, although God, is afraid of death, like any man. In response, Abaddon refuses Satan, since the Lord of Hell sees his divine nature and says that Jesus can do what he wants, even rise from the dead and resurrect others, and that his appearance in hell can disrupt the existing world order in the universe. And while this dialogue is going on, the situation around is heating up. Jesus bursts into hell, and with his voice, the voice of the saints and the voice of God, breaks the gates of hell, causes complete chaos there, leads out all the righteous people languishing in hell from the very creation of the world, chains Satan and gives him to the Lord of Hell, Abaddon, for eternal torment. Hell is simply not designed for the appearance on its territory of the soul of God, possessing unlimited power. It is impossible to subject it to torture, and no Lord of Hell can simply resist Jesus. After this, the entire system of hell collapses, and Jesus leads out all the souls of the righteous languishing there straight to heaven. Joseph of Arimathea, the very man who took Jesus down from the cross and buried him when all his disciples fled, sends Pontius Pilate a written account of everything that happened, and he sends this account to Rome, to Caesar himself. The Gospel of Nicodemus, although not canonical, is unique in many unexpected details. It names many nameless characters, It tells in detail about Jesus' entry into hell, and how Satan and the chief tormentor of hell are different forces, and that the Lord of hell does not obey Satan, that Christ was afraid of death, and that the Jewish priests themselves took the blame for the death of Jesus upon themselves and their descendants. In conclusion of our story, I would like to remind you that today science knows more than 300 Christian apocryphal texts. Tony Burke, the author of the book The New Testament Apocrypha, Non-Canonical Writings, wrote that apocryphal texts were an integral part of the spiritual life of Christians for a long time after the adoption of the canon, and calls to avoid and even destroy such literature were not always effective. Ancient Christians often argued about which texts tell the truth about Jesus and which do not. As a result, by the end of the 4th century, the Church canonized those texts that it considered the most accurate and included them in the Bible. In this case, the number of coincidences and episodes between all the Gospels that existed at that time was taken into account. And there were only 4 such Gospels: Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John. It was these that the Ecumenical Council later recognized as canonical. The rest remained in the rank of apocrypha,